What if I told you that the man who built one of the largest e-commerce empires in the world, worth hundreds of billions of dollars, was once rejected from every job he ever applied for? That he failed his university entrance exam not once, not twice, but 3 times. That he applied to Harvard 10 times and was rejected 10 times. That even KFC, when it first opened in his city, hired 23 out of 24 applicants, and Jack Ma was the only one left out. This is not the backstory of a loser. It's the prelude to one of the greatest comeback stories in business history. Because this man, once dismissed as too short, too thin, too poor, and too strange, would go on to create Alibaba, a company that today rivals Amazon and transform China's economy forever. Jack Ma's life is a living contradiction. He is the face of success built on failure. The man who admits he was never good at math, who had no connections, no money, and no powerful family name, yet somehow rewrote the rules of entrepreneurship, technology, and leadership. But here's the real question. How does someone with no resources, no skills, and nothing but rejection become one of the richest men in the world? That's the mystery we're about to unravel. Before Alibaba became a household name, before Jack Ma stood on global stages alongside presidents and billionaires, his story was one long series of humiliations. He failed in school. He was laughed at by investors. He was dismissed by his peers. To most people, these failures would have been the end of the road. But for Jack, they became the fuel that built his empire. And this is why his story matters, not just as a biography, but as a roadmap for anyone who has ever been told, "You're not good enough." Because Jack's life teaches us something profound. Sometimes the very failures that break most people are the same failures that prepare a rare few for greatness. Imagine the scene. It's 1999, Hangzhou, China. A cramped apartment with peeling paint and barely enough chairs to seat a dozen people. Jack Ma stands in front of 17 of his friends. He is not rich. He is not powerful. He is not even respected as a businessman. Yet he tells them about a dream. A digital marketplace called Alibaba, where Chinese businesses can sell to the world. Most of them don't understand what the internet even is. Some laugh. Others think he's crazy. But Jack's conviction is magnetic. Against all odds, those 17 people agree to follow him. That moment in a small, ordinary room would mark the birth of a company that would grow to over 250,000 employees and change the way 1.4 billion Chinese citizens shop, work, and live. Jack Ma once said, "If you don't give up, you still have a chance. Giving up is the greatest failure." It's a philosophy he lived by, and it's why his journey feels less like a biography and more like a legendary saga. One that shows us how resilience, vision, and sheer stubbornness can turn rejection into triumph. But the hook of Jack's story isn't just that he succeeded. It's that he succeeded by being different. While Silicon Valley worshipped technology and algorithms, Jack Ma put his faith in people. He didn't understand coding, but he understood trust. He didn't have technical skills, but he had charisma and vision. Where others saw barriers, he saw bridges. This is what makes his story so cinematic, so unforgettable. He wasn't the smartest man in the room. He was the one who refused to quit. In this documentary, we will travel back to Jack Ma's childhood in a struggling China, where poverty and political turmoil shaped his resilience. We will relive the countless rejections that nearly broke him. We will witness the birth of Alibaba, the near collapse of the company, and the breathtaking rise that followed. And finally, we will uncover the lessons that turned this once-failed teacher into one of the most iconic entrepreneurs in history. Because the real story of Jack Ma isn't about how he made billions. It's about how he turned rejection into his greatest asset. So buckle up. This isn't just the tale of a businessman. This is the journey of a man who proved that failure is only the beginning. Why does Jack Ma's story matter to you, sitting here right now? After all, you might never plan to build a company as massive as Alibaba. You might not dream of standing on a stage speaking to world leaders, or ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. But here's the truth. Jack Ma's life is not just the story of one man. It's a mirror that reflects the struggles, doubts, and dreams inside all of us. Think about it. How many times have you faced rejection? How many times has someone told you that you're not smart enough, not skilled enough, or not the right fit? For most people, rejection feels like a stop sign. But for Jack Ma, rejection was a compass. Every no pushed him closer to the path that would define his destiny. That's the first reason you should watch. Jack's failures are more relatable than his success. We may not know what it's like to make billions, but we all know what it's like to be told you're not good enough. But there's another reason. Jack Ma didn't just build a business. He reshaped an entire economy. In the 1990s, China was still a closed-off, state-controlled society, where private enterprise was risky and technology was a mystery. The internet had just arrived, and most people had no idea what it meant. Yet Jack saw something no one else saw. A future where Chinese businesses, big or small, could sell to the world with a click. That vision changed everything. Today, Alibaba is not just an online marketplace. It's a digital empire that powers e-commerce, payments, logistics, cloud computing, and entertainment. Without Jack Ma, the digital revolution in China would look completely different. His story is not just personal, it's historical. By the end of this documentary, you'll understand how one man's stubborn dream created opportunities for millions of small businesses, lifted communities out of poverty, and inspired a generation of entrepreneurs across Asia and beyond. And then there's the paradox that makes Jack's story irresistible. He built a technology giant while admitting he knew nothing about technology. He couldn't code. He wasn't an engineer. He didn't even own a computer until his 30s. So how did he do it? That's the third reason you should keep watching. Because Jack Ma's rise isn't about technical genius. It's about leadership, vision, and belief. He teaches us that you don't need to be the smartest, the richest, or the most talented person in the room. You just need to be the one who refuses to give up, who can inspire others, and who can see possibilities where others see obstacles. Jack's story is also a warning. Success didn't come without costs. He faced betrayals, near bankruptcies, crushing competition, and even battles with the Chinese government. At the height of his power, he learned that building an empire can also mean becoming a target. His life is filled with victories, but also with cautionary lessons about ambition, power, and knowing when to step back. So if you stay with me through the story, here's what you'll take away. How rejection can become your greatest weapon. How vision matters more than resources. How leadership, not technical skill, can build an empire. How resilience is built through failure, not success. And how even the greatest rise comes with challenges no one expects. Above all, watching Jack Ma's journey is about hope. It's about the idea that greatness doesn't come from being born special. It comes from refusing to quit when everything is against you. And that's a lesson that applies whether you're an entrepreneur, a student, a professional, or simply someone trying to build a better life. So why should you watch? Because by the end of the story, you won't just know how Jack Ma built Alibaba, you'll know how to face your own rejections differently. You'll see failure not as the end, but as the beginning of something bigger. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Before the billions, before the speeches, before Alibaba, to a small boy growing up in communist China, where life was anything but easy. Long before Jack Ma became the face of Alibaba, he was just Ma Yun, a skinny boy growing up in Hangzhou, a city surrounded by mountains and the West Lake's quiet beauty. But beneath that postcard scenery, life was harsh. Jack was born in 1964, during the shadows of Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution, a time when China was isolated, poor, and suspicious of outside influence. Jack's family wasn't wealthy. In fact, they struggled. His parents were traditional musicians who performed pingtan, a kind of storytelling through song. It wasn't considered prestigious work, and in a society where family background dictated your opportunities, this left young Jack at the bottom of the ladder. Money was scarce, but so was freedom. For a curious, restless child like Jack, the world felt small and confined. But here's the twist. Hardship didn't crush him. It sharpened him. From a young age, Jack Ma was different. He was talkative, stubborn, and endlessly curious. Unlike many children in his neighborhood, who kept their heads down, Jack asked questions. Lots of them. Teachers found him a handful. He wasn't the best student. In fact, Math was his greatest weakness, and it haunted him throughout school. Later, he would joke, "I failed my primary school exams twice, I failed middle school exams 3 times, and I failed university entrance exams 3 times." In a society obsessed with test scores, this was devastating. For many families, education was the only escape from poverty. Each failure made Jack look like someone destined to be left behind. But Jack had something exams couldn't measure: a hunger for language, for communication, for connection. In the 1970s, China began slowly opening its doors to foreign visitors. And in Hangzhou, something extraordinary happened. Tourists started arriving to see the famous West Lake. For young Jack, this was magic. Foreigners meant stories, accents, and windows into a bigger world. So, as a skinny teenager, he did something bold. He began riding his bicycle every morning to the hotels near the lake, offering to give free tours in exchange for practicing English. Day after day, he cycled for miles. He spoke with Americans, Australians, Europeans, anyone willing to chat. He learned their slang, their humor, their way of thinking. One tourist from Australia even became a lifelong pen pal, giving Jack his first glimpse of life outside China. This was a turning point. While other kids memorized textbooks, Jack was building a rare skill: the ability to connect across cultures. He didn't know it yet, but this skill would later help him convince skeptical investors, inspire global partners, and make Alibaba an international powerhouse. But let's not romanticize his childhood too much. Jack's life was full of frustrations. Teachers scolded him. Classmates teased him for being small and wiry. He was, by all measures, ordinary, except for his stubbornness. His father worried that Jack's outspoken nature might get him into trouble in a time when conformity was safer than individuality. But Jack couldn't help himself. He had a fire, an almost irrational belief that he was meant for something bigger, even if nobody else saw it. This is where the first seeds of resilience were planted. Rejection was already shaping him. Failure was already his teacher. Every exam he flunked, every job he couldn't get, was secretly building the armor he would one day need. There's a famous story from Jack's teenage years that captures the spirit. One day, when he was about 15, Jack befriended a tourist who invited him to visit Australia. It was the first time Jack left China, and it blew his mind. He saw a society full of freedom, openness, and possibility. When he returned home, he no longer looked at China the same way. He realized how limited his world had been, and he made himself a promise. One day, he would build something that connected China to the rest of the world. At that time, it sounded impossible. Jack had no money, no powerful family, and no outstanding academic record. But he had vision, and as history would prove, vision sometimes matters more than anything else. The boy who cycled to the West Lake for free English lessons would grow into a man who brought the world to China. But before that, he had to endure years of rejection, humiliation, and closed doors. Jack Ma's childhood wasn't a fairy tale. It was a training ground. It gave him scars, but also grit. It made him realize that while he might never be the smartest in the room, he could be the one who refused to quit. And that mindset would be tested again and again, starting with one of the hardest chapters of his life: his long list of rejections. If Jack Ma's childhood was a lesson in persistence, his early adult years were a masterclass in rejection. This is where most people would have given up, where the humiliation would have been too much to bear. But for Jack, rejection wasn't the end. It was the beginning of his transformation. After barely scraping through school, Jack dreamed of entering college. In China, that meant passing the brutal Gaokao, the National University Entrance Exam, an exam so competitive it has been called the hardest test in the world. Jack failed not once, not twice, but 3 times. Each time, friends moved ahead with their studies, while he sat at home, humiliated. For many, this would have been a permanent scar. But Jack refused to quit. On his 4th attempt, he finally passed, barely, and entered Hangzhou Teachers Institute, studying English. Compared to elite universities, this was modest. But for Jack, it was his lifeline. He would later say, "I am not good at studies, but I was good at never giving up." And yet, graduation brought him no relief. In fact, it was only the beginning of his battle with rejection. Picture this. A young Jack Ma, skinny, standing in line with dozens of other applicants, clutching his resume. He applied for over 30 different jobs. Police officer? Rejected. Hotel worker? Rejected. Waiter? Rejected. And then came the infamous story that Jack loves to tell. When KFC first opened in Hangzhou, 24 people applied for jobs. 23 were hired. Jack Ma was the only one rejected. Even the police turned him down. They told him he didn't have the right build. Harvard, he applied 10 times only to receive rejection letters every single time. Most people would have felt cursed. Jack instead began laughing at his failures. He developed a strange kind of confidence in rejection itself. He realized that while others could deny him, they could not break him. But Jack still needed work. Eventually, he found a job as an English teacher at a local university, earning about $12 a month. It was not glamorous. It was not powerful. But it was meaningful. Jack loved teaching. His students loved him back. In the classroom, he discovered a talent that would later define his leadership at Alibaba. The ability to inspire people through words. Jack once said, "I may not know anything about technology, but I know how to talk. I know how to inspire." That gift was sharpened in those classrooms, where a failed job applicant found his first taste of success. Not in wealth, but in influence. Still, the rejections kept haunting him. Friends doubted him. Employers dismissed him. And deep down, Jack sometimes questioned himself. Why did the world keep saying no? Why was he always the one left out? But here's the cinematic twist. Every rejection was pushing Jack toward the one path he was meant to take. If Harvard had accepted him, if KFC had hired him, if the police had taken him in, Jack Ma would never have become Jack Ma. He might have lived an ordinary life, safe but unremarkable. Instead, rejection forced him to carve his own way. He later reflected, "If everybody agrees, then there is no opportunity. Rejection is what gave me direction." By his early 30s, Jack Ma was a failed applicant-turned-modest teacher. On paper, his life looked painfully ordinary. He was broke, overlooked, and dismissed by nearly every employer he ever met. But destiny was waiting, and it would arrive in the form of a strange, glowing box in America. Something Jack had never seen before. A computer connected to the internet. That moment would change everything. Every great story has a turning point. For Jack Ma, it came in 1995 during a trip that would forever alter the trajectory of his life, and in many ways the trajectory of China itself. By this time, Jack was in his early 30s. He was still an English teacher, making just $12 a month, but he had developed a side hustle. Thanks to his fluency in English, he occasionally worked as a translator. One day, a government trade delegation invited him to travel to the United States to help with translation. For Jack, who had grown up in a closed, isolated China, this was like stepping into another universe. And in America, he encountered something that, at first, seemed like a toy but turned out to be the future. The internet. Jack had never touched a computer before. In fact, he didn't even know how to type. But his friends in Seattle sat him down in front of a bulky monitor, connected to something called the World Wide Web. They asked him what he wanted to search. Jack thought for a moment and typed one word, beer. To his astonishment, results popped up instantly, from countries all over the world. But there was nothing from China. He tried another word, China. Again, nothing. It was like China didn't exist online. In that instant, Jack Ma felt a jolt of electricity shoot through him. He realized the internet wasn't just a machine. It was a window, a bridge, a way to connect China to the rest of the world. And nobody was doing it yet. Jack later described it simply, "I came back to China, and I said, this is something that will change the world, and I want to play a part in it. But let's pause for a second. Imagine being Jack in that moment. You're not a computer scientist. You can't write a single line of code. You don't even own a computer. Yet you're staring at something so powerful, so world-changing, that you know you can't walk away." That was Jack's genius. While others saw a novelty, he saw an opportunity. When Jack returned to China, he couldn't stop talking about the internet. Friends thought he was crazy. Remember, in 1995, most Chinese people had never even seen a computer, let alone heard of the internet. Even telephone lines were unreliable in many places. The idea of shopping online or connecting businesses through digital platforms sounded like science fiction. But Jack was relentless. He gathered a few friends and scraped together 2,000 to launch his very first internet company, China Pages. The idea was simple: create websites for Chinese businesses, helping them advertise to the world. Jack's team built sample sites, pitched local companies, and tried to convince them that going online would help them grow. First, people laughed. They asked, "Why would anyone need a website? Who will see it?" Investors scoffed. Even the government was skeptical. Jack's tiny startup struggled to survive. China Pages never took off in the way Jack hoped. It wasn't the giant breakthrough, but it did something far more important. It taught Jack Ma his first lessons about the internet, entrepreneurship, and persistence in a digital age. And then came the spark of destiny. While working with China Pages, Jack was invited to join a government project in Beijing, helping to promote the internet on a national level. This gave him access to early networks, pioneers, and visionaries in the field. But Jack quickly realized something: governments move slowly. They didn't understand the urgency of what was coming. Jack wasn't content with slow. He knew the internet wouldn't wait. In that moment, he made a bold decision. He would walk away from government-backed security and start again, on his own terms. This was the leap that would eventually lead to Alibaba. Looking back, Jack often described that first encounter with the internet as love at first sight. He didn't understand the technology, but he understood its potential. And that distinction is what set him apart. Many brilliant engineers could build the tools, but Jack could imagine the future. It's a lesson for all of us. You don't always need to be the expert. Sometimes you just need to see what others can't. By 1999, Jack Ma was ready to risk it all, ready to bring his crazy dream to life in a small Hangzhou apartment, where 17 friends would gather around a table to listen to his vision. That meeting would give birth to Alibaba. It was February 1999 in Hangzhou, China. The winter air was cold, the city streets still quiet in those pre-digital days. Inside a small, ordinary apartment, a man who had been rejected from nearly every job he applied for stood before a group of 17 friends. His name was Jack Ma, and what he was about to say sounded insane. Jack told them about a company he wanted to build, a platform that would connect small businesses in China with buyers across the world, a place where entrepreneurs, shopkeepers, and factories could sell their products online, bypassing middlemen and reaching customers directly. He called it Alibaba. Why Alibaba? Jack explained that he wanted a name that was easy to spell, easy to remember, and known across cultures. From the story Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, he loved the phrase "open sesame," a magical command that opened hidden treasure. Jack believed the internet could be the modern-day open sesame for small businesses, unlocking treasure where none seemed to exist. At that time, hardly anyone in China understood what the internet was. Even fewer believed it could make money. Some in that room thought Jack was dreaming too big. Others were skeptical. But Jack had something powerful, an unshakable conviction. He looked each of them in the eye and said, "If we work together, we can build something that will last for 80 years, maybe even 102 years. We are not here for ourselves. We are here to help small businesses." That night, in a cramped apartment with peeling paint and little money, Alibaba was born. But starting Alibaba was anything but glamorous. The team had no real funding, no connections, and no technical expertise. They worked with old computers, a slow dial-up connection, and the kind of relentless hustle that only desperation can fuel. Jack wasn't a coder, so he became the visionary and the motivator. He pushed his team with fiery speeches, endless optimism, and a clear sense of mission. While most Chinese entrepreneurs at the time were trying to get rich quickly, Jack framed Alibaba differently. He said, "Our competitors are not in China. Our competitors are in Silicon Valley. If we want to survive, we must think bigger." This mindset was radical. In 1999, the Chinese tech industry barely existed. Yet Jack was already positioning Alibaba on a global stage. Still, the early days were brutal. Jack and his team knocked on doors, begging small businesses to put their information online. Many didn't even have computers. Convincing them to invest in a digital marketplace was like asking farmers to fly airplanes. The rejection was constant. People laughed in their faces. Investors turned them down repeatedly. Banks refused loans. Jack had no collateral, no credibility. He and his wife even considered selling their apartment just to keep the company alive. But Jack's belief never wavered. He told his team, "If we don't give up, we still have a chance. Giving up is the greatest failure." The breakthrough came when Alibaba secured its first round of investment from Goldman Sachs and SoftBank. It wasn't easy. Jack had to endure dozens of rejections before those deals came through. But once they did, Alibaba had the oxygen it needed to survive. And here's where Jack's true leadership emerged. While most entrepreneurs would have focused on immediate profits, Jack declared something shocking. "For the first 3 years, Alibaba will not make a single penny. Our job is to build trust. If people trust us, the money will come." It was a gamble. In a country where corruption was rampant and scams were common, Jack knew trust was more valuable than money. He made it Alibaba's core principle. And slowly, painfully, it began to work. Alibaba started to grow. Small businesses joined. Word spread. But the battle was far from won. The dot-com bubble was about to burst. Giants like eBay were eyeing China. Competition was fierce, capital was scarce, and Alibaba's survival was anything but guaranteed. Yet through it all, Jack kept repeating the same mantra. "We are here to fight for small businesses. If we don't give up, the world will give us a chance." From that small apartment, a revolution had begun. What started as a crazy dream would soon become a global empire. But first, Jack and his team had to survive their darkest days. The struggles that nearly destroyed Alibaba before it could even rise. The birth of Alibaba was inspiring, but survival was another story. The truth is, in the early 2000s, Jack Ma's dream almost collapsed more times than anyone could count. The company lived on the edge of bankruptcy, faced ruthless competitors, and had to fight not just for customers, but for its very existence. The first major challenge came with the dot-com crash. Around the world, internet startups were imploding. Investors who had once thrown money at anything with a .com in its name suddenly slammed their wallets shut. Trust in online businesses evaporated. For Alibaba, this was catastrophic. The company had just started gaining traction, but revenue was barely enough to cover operations. Jack and his 18 co-founders worked tirelessly, often late into the night, on little more than passion and instant noodles. The office was cramped, the computers outdated, and salaries sometimes delayed. Employees whispered about leaving. Some believed Alibaba was doomed. But Jack refused to quit. He gathered his team and told them, "We will survive. That is our mission. If we survive for 5 more years, no one will be able to ignore us." His optimism wasn't blind, it was strategic. While other companies chased quick profits, Jack doubled down on Alibaba's mission, helping small businesses. Then came the biggest threat of all, eBay. In 2003, the American giant entered China with deep pockets, strong technology, and a proven global track record. They quickly acquired eachnet, the leading Chinese e-commerce platform, giving them instant market share. To outsiders, it looked like Alibaba's days were numbered. But Jack wasn't intimidated. He knew something eBay didn't. China was different. Trust was fragile. People weren't used to paying strangers online. Western-style platforms didn't resonate with local culture. So Jack launched Taobao, a consumer-to-consumer marketplace designed specifically for China. Unlike eBay, Taobao was free for sellers at first. It used bright, colorful designs rather than the plain, text-heavy style of American sites. And most importantly, it introduced Alipay, an escrow-based payment system that held money until buyers confirmed delivery. This was revolutionary. It solved the single biggest problem in Chinese e-commerce: trust. At first, Taobao looked like a small experiment. But Jack was playing a long game. While eBay spent millions on advertising, Taobao grew organically, building loyalty among sellers and buyers who felt understood. Jack called it globalization, global technology adapted to local needs. And then, in a stunning move, eBay decided to centralize its Chinese operations back to the United States. That decision disconnected them from the Chinese market. Jack seized the moment, rallying his team with fiery words. eBay may be a shark in the ocean, but I am a crocodile in the Yangtze River. If we fight in the ocean, we will lose. But if we fight in the river, we will win. Within 2 years, Taobao crushed eBay in China. By 2006, eBay's market share had collapsed, and they retreated, leaving Alibaba victorious. But victory came at a cost. Alibaba had burned through money, stretched its workforce to the limit, and fought daily battles for survival. Jack often reminded his employees, "Today is hard, tomorrow will be worse, but the day after tomorrow will be sunshine. Most people will die tomorrow night. That is why we must fight." His words weren't just motivational, they were survival instructions. Alibaba didn't have the luxury of failing. They either outworked their competition or they disappeared. Through these struggles, Alibaba forged its identity. It wasn't just an internet company, it was a fighter's company. Employees called themselves Ali people, bonded by hardship. They worked long hours not for salaries, but for belief in the mission. And Jack was the beating heart of that mission, constantly reminding them why they existed. Not for Wall Street, not for fame, but for the small shopkeepers and entrepreneurs who had been ignored by the system. By 2005, Alibaba was no longer a fragile startup. It had survived the dot-com crash, beaten eBay in its own game, and proven it could thrive in China's unpredictable market. Yet the real rise was only beginning. With Taobao gaining dominance and Alibaba.com connecting millions of businesses worldwide, Jack was about to lead his company into a new era. One that would transform it from a scrappy survivor into a global giant. By the mid-2000s, Alibaba had gone from a struggling startup in a tiny Hangzhou apartment to a company that had beaten eBay at its own game. But Jack Ma wasn't satisfied. He didn't just want to win in China, he wanted Alibaba to become a global giant. This phase of the journey was about scaling, vision, and proving that a Chinese company could stand shoulder to shoulder with the biggest names in the world. The first big leap came in 2005, when Yahoo invested $1 billion in Alibaba in exchange for a 40% stake. For Jack, this wasn't just about money. It was about credibility. Suddenly, Alibaba wasn't just a scrappy Chinese company. It was backed by one of Silicon Valley's giants. The deal gave Alibaba the firepower to expand aggressively. Taobao continued to grow, eventually becoming China's dominant consumer marketplace. Meanwhile, Alibaba.com solidified its position as the go-to-B2B platform, connecting millions of Chinese manufacturers with buyers worldwide. But Jack wasn't content with two pillars. He wanted to build an ecosystem. That ecosystem started with Alipay. Originally launched to solve trust issues between buyers and sellers, Alipay grew into something far bigger. It became a full-fledged digital payment platform, laying the foundation for what would later evolve into Ant Financial, one of the most valuable fintech companies on the planet. With Alipay, Alibaba wasn't just selling goods, it was reshaping how money moved in China. For millions of Chinese citizens who had never owned a credit card, Alipay was their first step into the modern financial system. And Alibaba didn't stop there. Logistics, cloud computing, and even entertainment became part of Jack's vision. He wanted Alibaba to be a digital empire, one that touched every aspect of people's lives. The world started to notice. In 2014, Alibaba went public on the New York Stock Exchange, raising a jaw-dropping $25 billion, the largest IPO in history at the time. Overnight, Jack Ma became a global celebrity, his face plastered on newspapers and financial networks around the world. The symbolism was powerful. A Chinese company, born out of rejection and hardship, had just made Wall Street bow. Jack Ma, the man once rejected by KFC, was now ringing the bell at the NYSE, representing a company worth more than Amazon and eBay combined at the time. But what made Alibaba's rise so extraordinary wasn't just the numbers. It was the mission. Jack consistently reminded his team and the world, "Our dream is not to make money. Our dream is to make it easier to do business anywhere." And he meant it. While Western e-commerce giants focused on urban middle-class consumers, Alibaba went deeper. It empowered rural entrepreneurs, small factories, mom-and-pop shops, and millions of individuals who had been locked out of the global economy. By the 2010s, Alibaba wasn't just a company. It was an economic engine for China. It created jobs, enabled small businesses, and helped pull countless families out of poverty. Jack's charisma fueled the rise. He was unlike any other CEO. He quoted Forrest Gump in speeches. He dressed up as Michael Jackson and performed at company parties. He laughed at his failures on global stages, turning vulnerability into strength. While other tech leaders hid behind jargon, Jack spoke in simple human language that inspired millions. He once told entrepreneurs, "If you want to be successful, you should have great perseverance. If you don't give up, you still have a chance. Giving up is the greatest failure." This message resonated not just in China, but worldwide. Jack became a global icon, invited to speak at Davos, G20 summits, and universities across the globe. For the first time, the world wasn't just looking at Chinese products, they were looking at a Chinese leader. By the late 2010s, Alibaba was everywhere. Taobao and Tmall dominated e-commerce. Alipay reshaped finance. Alibaba Cloud competed with Amazon Web Services. Cainiao revolutionized logistics, and new ventures stretched into media, entertainment, and even artificial intelligence. Alibaba wasn't just competing anymore, it was setting the pace. Yet with great rise comes great pressure. As Alibaba grew into a global empire, Jack Ma himself began to transform. He was no longer just an underdog teacher-turned-entrepreneur. He was becoming something bigger, a symbol of modern China and a global business icon. But with that transformation came new challenges. Challenges that would force Jack to redefine his role, his mission, and even his future. By the time Alibaba's IPO shattered records in 2014, Jack Ma was no longer just a businessman. He had become something much bigger, a global icon. His name was mentioned in the same breath as Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk. But unlike them, Jack's story carried an underdog magic. He wasn't the genius engineer or the Wall Street wizard. He was the failed teacher who had defied gravity. This transformation was both powerful and dangerous. Jack's charisma played a huge role. Unlike many tech founders who hid behind data and strategy, Jack Ma thrived on stage. He was funny, humble, and deeply human. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, he cracked jokes about his failures. At universities, he spoke about resilience with a warmth that made him sound less like a billionaire CEO and more like a mentor. And then there were the unforgettable performances. At Alibaba's anniversary parties, Jack would dress up in outrageous costumes, singing rock ballads, performing Michael Jackson dances, or strutting in leather jackets. These weren't just stunts. They sent a message. Alibaba wasn't a cold corporation. It was a family, a culture, a movement. His employees adored him. Entrepreneurs worshipped him. Ordinary Chinese citizens saw him as proof that someone with no background, no wealth, and no privilege could rise to the very top. Jack had become more than a leader. He was a symbol of hope. But symbols attract attention. And attention, especially in China, can be dangerous. As Alibaba expanded into finance with Alipay and later Ant Financial, it began touching one of the most sensitive areas in China: money. Millions of Chinese citizens started using Alipay instead of traditional banks. Ant Financial offered loans, wealth management, and insurance services that rivaled, and in some ways threatened, the state banking system. This made Jack a superstar in the eyes of entrepreneurs and consumers, but it also put him on the radar of regulators and powerful interests. Jack didn't hold back either. In 2017, at a global conference, he spoke boldly about globalization and China's responsibility to open up. In 2020, just before Ant Group's planned IPO, Jack delivered a controversial speech criticizing China's financial regulators for being too conservative. Those words shook the system. Within weeks, Ant's record-breaking IPO, set to be the largest in history, was abruptly suspended by Chinese authorities. It was a signal. Jack Ma had flown too close to the sun. Shortly after, Jack disappeared from public view for several months, sparking rumors and global headlines. Though he eventually re-emerged, his once dominant presence faded. He stepped back from Alibaba, handing over leadership to successors. And yet, this retreat only cemented his legend, because Jack Ma's story had already transcended business. By this point, he had become a case study in resilience, leadership, and vision. Universities around the world analyzed his speeches. Entrepreneurs quoted him like scripture. Young dreamers in China, India, Africa, and beyond saw in him a beacon. Proof that you didn't have to be born into privilege to change the world. Jack himself often said he never wanted to be the richest man. He wanted to be remembered as the man who helped others succeed. "My job is to make more people rich," he once declared, "not to be rich myself." And in many ways, he succeeded. Alibaba's platforms enabled millions of small businesses to thrive, empowering people who had once been left behind. The transformation of Jack Ma was complete. From a failed teacher to a billionaire founder. From an ordinary man to a global icon. From being rejected at KFC to shaking hands with presidents and kings. But the true magic wasn't in the wealth or the fame. It was in the story itself. The idea that failure, rejection, and struggle can be the foundation of greatness. Still, every legend carries lessons. Truths carved out of both triumph and hardship. And Jack Ma's legacy offers some of the most powerful lessons of all. When we look back at Jack Ma's extraordinary journey, the question isn't just how he built Alibaba. The real question is, what can the rest of us learn from him? Because while Jack's fortune may belong to him, his lessons belong to all of us. Lesson 1. Rejection is not the end, it's the beginning. Jack's life was a symphony of rejection. Failed exams, job applications denied, Harvard rejections. Even fast food chains didn't want him. Yet instead of seeing rejection as defeat, Jack reframed it as training. Every no toughened him. Every failure taught him resilience. He once said, "If you've never tried, how will you ever know if there's a chance?" This is the first and perhaps greatest lesson of his story. Failure isn't permanent. It's feedback. It's part of the process. Lesson 2. You don't need to be the smartest, you need to see what others can't. Jack openly admitted he was terrible at math and technology. He couldn't code. He wasn't a financial genius. But he had vision. Where others saw an empty internet, he saw a bridge connecting China to the world. Where eBay saw a market, Jack saw a culture and adapted to it. His strength wasn't in technical knowledge. It was in seeing the bigger picture, and then inspiring others to believe in it too. Lesson 3. Mission matters more than money. From the very beginning, Jack made trust and mission the core of Alibaba. He told his team, "We will not make money for 3 years. Our goal is to help small businesses." That decision, unthinkable to many entrepreneurs, became Alibaba's superpower. People trusted Jack because he wasn't chasing quick profits. He was building something deeper, a platform that created opportunities for millions of others. In the long run, that mission made Alibaba far more valuable than money ever could. Lesson 4. Leadership is about people, not power. Jack wasn't a typical CEO. He didn't lead through fear or authority. He led through storytelling, humor, and relentless optimism. He danced, he sang, he dressed up in silly costumes because he knew leadership isn't about being distant. It's about being relatable. He once told his employees, "I'm not here to make you rich. I'm here to make you stronger." That philosophy turned a ragtag team in a small apartment into one of the most powerful companies in the world. Lesson 5. Know when to step back. Perhaps the hardest lesson Jack taught came at the end of his reign. His rise to global fame brought admiration but also scrutiny. By stepping back from Alibaba and Ant Financial, Jack reminded the world of an important truth. No leader, no matter how charismatic, is bigger than the mission. Alibaba was never just Jack Ma. It was the millions of businesses and entrepreneurs it empowered. His willingness to retreat ensured that Alibaba's legacy could continue without him. But Jack's legacy isn't just corporate. It's human. He gave hope to dreamers everywhere. The students who fail exams, the workers who get rejected, the entrepreneurs with no money or connections. He proved that success isn't reserved for the privileged few. It's possible for anyone willing to endure failure, to keep going when others stop, and to believe in a vision that no one else can see. Today, Jack Ma lives a quieter life, spending more time on education, philanthropy, and hobbies like farming. But his story still echoes in classrooms, boardrooms, and startup garages around the world. Because Jack Ma's greatest gift isn't Alibaba. It's the belief that an ordinary person, armed with extraordinary persistence, can change the world. And so, from a poor boy in Hangzhou who failed exams, to a teacher rejected from KFC, to the founder of one of the greatest companies of the 21st century, Jack Ma's journey reminds us of one powerful truth. The road to success is paved with failure, but the only true failure is giving up.